Welcome to True Crime Case Files. In this episode, we'll explore the tragic case of a newlywed wife with a secret that would ultimately take her life. This story is one of deception, betrayal, and a deadly clash of identities between husband and wife. Ariana Hensley, 26, was a dedicated and compassionate special education teacher who lived in El Paso, Texas, a quiet border city. Originally from Michigan, Ariana had made a name for herself as a caring educator who was loved by her students and colleagues. Her bright smile and gentle personality left a lasting impression on everyone she met. But though she had settled into a peaceful life, Ariana carried a deeply personal secret. She was a transgender woman. For most of her life, Ariana had hidden her true identity. Born as Jason Brownlee, she transitioned during college, and she had worked hard to build her new identity by undergoing a complete transformation, include having her genitals surgically changed from male to female. For her, this new life represented a fresh start, a chance to live authentically and embrace her true self. Ariana was always careful to keep her past hidden, even from her husband, Ahmad Al-Din, born Stuart Kinzer, whom she had married after a whirlwind romance only a few weeks before her death. Ahmad was an Army chaplain stationed at Fort Bliss, just outside of El Paso. Their wedding was a small but joyous occasion, with Ariana wearing a simple but elegant dress. However, everything changed on their wedding night. It was only then that Ahmad discovered Ariana's transgender identity, a secret she had previously kept out of fear of rejection. Ahmad's reaction was calm on the surface, but the revelation shook him to his core. A convert to a strict form of Islam with deeply conservative values, he struggled to accept this truth. The days leading up to Ariana's death were tense. Their once loving relationship turned cold, and Ariana began to sense that Ahmad was distancing himself from her. Friends of the couple noticed the strain between them, though Ariana remained hopeful they could work through it. In the meantime, she continued teaching and dreaming of one day adopting children, a future she was excited about. But behind her radiant smile, Ariana feared that her marriage, and perhaps her life, was crumbling. The tragic events that unfolded just days later would shatter her dreams forever. On the morning of June 15, 2016, around 10:30 a.m., a sanitation worker named Marcos Hall was going through his usual route in El Paso, Texas. As he pulled up behind a Whataburger fast food restaurant on Victory Drive, something unusual caught his eye near the dumpster. What he first thought was just a pile of discarded clothes turned out to be much worse. Upon closer inspection, Marcos realized it was a body. Shocked, he immediately called 911. Marcos had been working as a garbage truck driver for over 10 years, but he had never encountered anything like this. He was visibly shaken when the police arrived, pacing back and forth near his truck. "I knew something was weird," he told reporters later that day. "But I never thought I'd find a dead girl's body." The area behind the fast food restaurant wasn't heavily trafficked, especially early in the morning, which made it an ideal spot for someone trying to hide a body. However, the Whataburger itself, known for its square burgers and late-night crowds, was popular with locals, and its location on Victory Drive meant the area was typically busy by midday. News of the gruesome discovery quickly spread, sending shockwaves through the normally quiet military town. When officers from the El Paso Police Department arrived on the scene and quickly secured the area, the body was identified as Ariana Hensley. She was found wearing only her panties, and her body had clear signs of violence. She had been strangled, and her throat was deeply slashed. The position of her body, discarded so carelessly, hinted at an act of intense rage. There were no signs of a struggle at the scene, leading investigators to believe she had been killed elsewhere and dumped behind the Whataburger. The police immediately knew this case was going to be difficult. It was clear that whoever had done this was full of anger and had taken extreme measures to conceal their crime. By 11:30 a.m. on June 15, 2016, the El Paso Police Department had cordoned off the area behind the Whataburger on Victory Drive. Detective Diana Menendez, a 32-year veteran of the force known for her ample breasts, led the investigation. Menendez was known for her sharp eye and calm demeanor, even in the most unsettling cases. Alongside her was Officer James Garcia, a newer recruit eager to prove himself. Both officers were immediately struck by the brutality of the crime. The crime scene was grim. Ariana Hensley's body lay discarded in a dumpster, her throat slashed and signs of strangulation visible around her neck. She was nearly unrecognizable due to the extreme violence inflicted on her body. Menendez noted the meticulous slashing of the throat, a detail suggesting the killer was not only angry, but also wanted to erase Ariana's identity, a possible motive rooted in intense hate or loathing. The fact that she was found wearing only her underwear deepened the suspicion that this murder was intensely personal and possibly sexual. The surrounding area behind the Whataburger didn't offer many clues at first glance. Victory Drive was usually bustling, but early in the morning, it was quieter. The fast food chain itself, known for its cheap sliders and popular with the local illegal immigrant community, was empty when the police arrived. No witnesses had come forward, and the dumpsters were used regularly, making it difficult to pinpoint exactly when the body had been left there. Detective Menendez and her team searched for any trace of evidence. They used forensic kits to swab for DNA on the body and nearby surfaces, hoping to find fingerprints or hair samples. Officer Garcia pinned his nose and combed through the dumpster's contents, looking for anything that might have been left behind by the killer. As they worked, Menendez couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't a random act. The rage evident in Ariana's injury suggested the murderer had known her. The team worked diligently, taking photos of the crime scene and bagging every piece of potential evidence. Menendez also called in the medical examiner to get a more detailed look at the body. Initial observations suggested that Ariana, who was determined not to have been sexually assaulted, had been dead for less than 24 hours before she was found, meaning the killer likely acted during the night or early morning hours. Despite the gruesome nature of the crime, the investigators remained focused. They had a body, a location, and a motive brewing in Menendez's mind. Now they just needed to find the person responsible. The first person the police looked into was Ariana Hensley's Newlywed husband, Ahmad Aldin. Ahmad, 27, born Stuart Kinzer, was an Army chaplain stationed at Fort Bliss, just outside of El Paso, Texas. On the surface, Ahmad seemed like an upstanding man of faith. He had grown up in rural Texas, where, like many, he was deeply involved in his church before converting to Islam when he was 15. Ahmad, who was in training to become an imam, was known for his strict religious beliefs, which included no sex before marriage, and he carried himself with a calm, composed demeanor that earned him the respect of his peers. But as the investigation deepened, police uncovered a different side to Ahmad. On the night of the murder, Ahmad had been staying at the couple's small house on base. When Detective Diana Menendez and her team first approached him for questioning, he seemed cooperative, though his hands trembled slightly. Menendez noticed that, while Ahmad was outwardly composed, his eyes betrayed him. He was struggling. The detectives began by asking Ahmad about his relationship with Ariana. He described her as sweet and caring, but when asked about their marriage, he grew more reserved. The police quickly learned that Ahmad had only discovered Ariana's transgender identity on their wedding night, just days before the murder. To someone like Ahmad, who had built his life around religious ideals and the promise of offspring, this revelation was a massive blow. Ariana had completely hidden her past as a man, and when it was revealed, Ahmad's strict Muslim beliefs were absolutely shattered. Though he claimed to love her, this new knowledge almost definitely fueled a deep conflict within him. During the interview, Ahmad spoke quietly and avoided eye contact when asked about the discovery. He said he needed time to process and had been struggling with understanding what it meant in the Quran for their marriage. His answers were measured, almost rehearsed. He didn't show any signs of anger, at least not outwardly. But Menendez knew something was brewing under the surface. When the questioning turned to his whereabouts during the time of Ariana's death, Ahmad claimed he had been home alone, reading the Quran and praying for guidance on this tricky issue. There was no one to verify his alibi. The investigators pressed him, asking if he had seen Ariana that night or if they had argued. Ahmad hesitated before denying any fight, but Menendez could sense his discomfort. Though Ahmad appeared calm, the police couldn't ignore the possibility that he had been harboring resentment after discovering Ariana's secret. His deeply rooted religious beliefs, combined with the shock of his wife's hidden past as a man, could have easily driven him to a breaking point. With a motive in place and no solid alibi, Ahmad became the primary suspect in Ariana's murder. Menendez and her team continued to gather evidence, but Ahmad's quiet, composed exterior couldn't hide the inner turmoil that made him their number one suspect. The second person investigators turned their attention to was Reverend George Kronsteiner, the 46-year-old minister of Fellowships of the Hunt, a small but close-knit church in El Paso, Texas that Ariana Hensley, who decided to not convert to Islam, had attended. Reverend Kronstinger was well known in the El Paso community for his passionate sermons on morality and his role as a spiritual leader. Outwardly, he seemed to live a picture-perfect life. He had been married for over 20 years, had 3 children, and often appeared in local charity events, the epitome of a pious life. But as detectives dug deeper, they uncovered a darker side to the Reverend's life. Ariana had confided in a friend that Reverend Kronstinger was her lover after he had made constant, unwanted sexual advances toward her months before her death. It turned out the Reverend had learned of Ariana's transgender identity during a private prayer session in his office, where he asked her to undress and saw scarring around her genital areas that indicated she was transgender. Rather than offering support, however, he had used the information against her. Ariana had apparently paid him off with sex and drugs she had acquired from the internet in exchange for his silence. This arrangement painted Reverend Kronstinger in a very different light as a secret drug and sex addict. When the police brought Reverend Kronstinger in for questioning, they found a man who was nervous but trying to keep his composure. Detective Diana Menendez started the interrogation by asking general questions about his relationship with Ariana. The Reverend described her as a dedicated member of the church, but became evasive when asked about his interactions with Ariana. He admitted he had counseled her, but avoided mentioning the more personal details of their exchanges. As the detectives pressed him further, they revealed what they had learned about the drugs and his sexual relationship with Ariana. Reverend Kronsteiner's face reddened, and his calm demeanor began to crack. He denied any involvement in her murder, but seemed rattled by the accusations. His responses became inconsistent, and he struggled to explain his interactions with Ariana. The investigators noted his shifting body language. He crossed his arms tightly and avoided eye contact. Though Reverend Kronstinger denied knowing anything about the night Ariana was killed, Menendez couldn't ignore the fact that he had much to lose if the truth about his behavior came to light. His secret drug use and inappropriate advances toward Ariana could have easily motivated him to silence her permanently. While Reverend Kronstinger didn't have a solid alibi for the night of Ariana's murder, he claimed he had been at home, having, quote, good Christian sex with his wife and eating with his children, though they couldn't verify his whereabouts. The police weren't convinced. His shaky answers and nervous behavior kept him high on their list of suspects. With Ahmad al-Din already under suspicion and now Reverend Kronstinger revealing a darker side, the investigation was growing more complicated. As detectives gathered evidence, they kept a close watch on both men, aware that either could have been capable of committing the horrific crime. On June 21, 2016, the investigation took a surprising turn. It was a rainy, overcast afternoon in El Paso, Texas, when police discovered a major twist in the case that linked Ahmad al-Din, born Stuart Kinzer, to illegal activity far beyond his marriage to Ariana. The revelation came when investigators uncovered evidence of a secret Ahmad had been hiding, one that tied him to illegal arms deals with Afghanistan, Syria, and other Islamic countries. The trail began with a routine financial check of Ahmad's accounts. Detectives noticed a series of strange deposits and transactions that didn't match up with his salary as an army chaplain. Digging deeper, they discovered Ahmad was drowning in debt, a burden that stretched all the way back to his childhood. At the age of 10, Ahmad had joined an organization called Monster Trucks for Kids, an innocent-sounding program that turned out to be an elaborate scheme that practically enslaved children to sell tickets for monster truck tournaments to other kids. This scheme set the stage for Ahmad's lifelong financial struggles. By 2016, Ahmad was in over his head with credit card debt, and his military paycheck couldn't cover his lavish spending habits, including a brand-new Dodge Challenger and a house filled with expensive gadgets. Facing a financial collapse, Ahmad had turned to desperate measures, stealing weapons from the military base at Fort Bliss and selling them illegally to the Syrian military. This illicit trade provided him with quick cash, but it also carried immense risk. This discovery cast a new light on the night Ariana was killed. Could she have found out about Ahmad's secret dealings and threatened to expose him? The investigators theorized that Ariana's knowledge of Ahmad's arms trade could have been a motive for murder. Not only had Ahmad been grappling with the shock of Ariana's transgender identity, but now it appeared he had a much larger secret to protect. The police speculated that Ariana, known for her honesty and sense of justice, might have confronted him about the weapons trade, pushing Ahmad to the brink. As the investigation into Ahmad's illegal activities deepened, Menendez and her team collected more evidence. They searched the couple's home and Ahmad's office on base, discovering documents and burner phones that linked him to the illegal sales. The team also interviewed several of Ahmad's colleagues, who admitted they had seen him acting strangely in the weeks leading up to Ariana's murder. With this new twist, Ahmad became the prime suspect once again. His motives were now clearer. Not only was he struggling with Ariana's transgender identity, but he was also desperate to protect his criminal enterprise. As police pieced together the evidence, they realized the murder might have been a desperate act to keep his secret life hidden. The third suspect in the investigation was Emmanuel Oliveros, a 31-year-old mechanic who worked at a local auto shop in El Paso. Emmanuel was well known around town for his friendliness and willingness to help others, but those who knew him closely often described him as a little too attached to certain people. He had secretly become one of Ariana Hensley's lovers during the school year after his deaf daughter Yaziel started attending her special education class. Emmanuel volunteered regularly, attending field trips and helping with classroom activities, using every opportunity to be around her. Though Ariana was always polite, it became clear to others at the school that Emmanuel's attention was more than just admiration for a good teacher. It was creepy. Several staff members recalled seeing him waiting pantsless in the parking lot long after school hours, trying to strike up conversations with Ariana. His feelings were reciprocated, and the two eventually had sex, but he didn't seem to know when to stop. By June 2016, Emmanuel's obsession had intensified. When Ariana stopped having sex with him, he began leaving her small gifts, such as bras, bags of coke, and even sex toys in her classroom. She didn't mention this to many people, but one coworker remembered Ariana saying it made her uncomfortable. She even joked about changing her route home to avoid running into him. Emmanuel, though, remained persistent. When detectives brought him in for questioning, Emmanuel initially seemed cooperative, even eager to help. Detective Diana Menendez led the interrogation, starting with casual questions about his relationship with Ariana. Emmanuel described her as the most incredible animal on the face of the earth, and insisted that his feelings were nothing but respectful admiration. However, as the questions grew more direct, Emmanuel's demeanor shifted. He became defensive when asked about the frequency of his interactions with Ariana outside of school, and his answers grew increasingly vague. The police pressed him on his whereabouts the night Ariana was murdered. Emmanuel claimed he had been home watching a sex tape he made of Ariana, but when asked to provide specifics about what he did after that, his memory faltered. Investigators also found it suspicious that his wife, who was out of town at the time, couldn't verify his alibi. Despite his nervous responses, Emmanuel denied any involvement in Ariana's death. However, his behavior raised red flags, and police couldn't rule him out as a potential suspect. They continued to probe into his obsession with Ariana, trying to determine if his unreciprocated feelings could have escalated into violence. While no direct evidence linked Emmanuel to the murder, the police felt his fixation on Ariana was concerning enough to keep him under close watch. By the end of June 2016, the police had built a compelling case against Ahmad al-Din, Ariana's Newlywed husband. Ahmad, born Stuart Kinzer, a 27-year-old Army chaplain stationed at Fort Bliss, was known for his strict Islamic beliefs and outwardly calm demeanor. However, as investigators uncovered more about his life, it became clear that Ahmad had been living a double life. His involvement in illegal arms deals and the discovery of Ariana's transgender identity had pushed him over the edge. On the night of their wedding, Ahmad learned that Ariana had been born male, a revelation that shattered his rigid worldview. To someone as devout as Ahmad, this was not just a personal betrayal but a religious one. But it wasn't until Ariana confronted him about his illegal weapons trade that things took a deadly turn. With both his illegal activities and his personal turmoil about her trans identity spiraling out of control, Ahmad snapped. The police pieced together the night of the murder using cell phone records, eyewitness accounts, and the mounting evidence of Ahmad's criminal activity. On June 30, 2016, at 11:00 p.m., a team of detectives arrived at the Hensley small house near Fort Bliss. They knew they had their man. Detective Diana Menendez, who had been leading the investigation, knocked on the door. Ahmad answered, visibly calm, but there was a tension in the air. The police told him they had enough evidence to arrest him for Ariana's murder. Ahmad didn't resist, but his face tightened as the handcuffs clicked around his wrist. He was led away without a word, his eyes staring ahead, emotionless. He didn't seem surprised by the arrest, as if he had known this moment was coming. Back at the station, under interrogation, Ahmad described the overwhelming rage he felt when Ariana revealed both her transgender identity and her knowledge of his illegal arms trade. In his mind, It was too much to bear. He strangled her in their bedroom before slashing her throat to ensure she wouldn't talk. Then, in a cold, methodical move, he placed her body in a dumpster to make it look like a random act of violence. Ahmad's confession was chilling in its detail and lack of remorse. Ariana's family was devastated when they learned that Ahmad, the man they had welcomed into their lives, was the one responsible. Her parents, who had traveled from Michigan for the upcoming trial, were heartbroken, and her students and co-workers at the school were left in shock. The trial of Ahmad al-Din began in August of 2017 in El Paso, Texas. The courtroom was packed with reporters and local residents who had followed the case closely. The prosecution was led by District Attorney Rachel Carmen Vagos, a sharp, no-nonsense lawyer in her early 40s known for her tenacity in high-profile cases. Carmen Vagos laid out the evidence against Ahmad with precision, focusing on his cold-blooded confession and the motive behind Ariana's murder. She argued that Ahmad, upon learning Ariana's transgender identity and her knowledge of his illegal arms dealings, acted out of rage and desperation. Carmen Vagos called several witnesses, including forensic experts who described the brutal manner in which Ariana had been killed. On the defense side was Mark Escovedo, a defense attorney in his late 30s, who had a reputation for being persuasive and charismatic. He painted Ahmad as a man who had been pushed to the edge by a series of life-altering revelations. Escovedo tried to argue that Ahmad was emotionally overwhelmed on the night of the murder and didn't fully grasp the consequences of his actions. He asked the jury to consider Ahmad's long military service and the pressures he faced, hoping for a lighter sentence. As the trial went on, the emotional toll on Ariana's family was evident. Her parents, who had flown in from Michigan, sat quietly in the front row, clutching each other's hands. Occasionally, they wiped away tears as details of the murder were recounted in court. Ariana's former co-workers from the school also attended the trial, devastated by the loss of someone they considered not just a colleague but a friend. After several days of testimony, the jury reached a verdict. On August 20, 2016, Ahmad al-Din was found guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom was silent as the verdict was read, except for a quiet gasp from Ariana's mother. For Ariana's family and friends, the sentence brought some relief, though it couldn't bring back the person they loved. Many in the community felt the punishment fit the crime, while others argued that the case highlighted the ongoing struggle for transgender rights and acceptance. The trial and its outcome left a lasting impact on those who followed it. Following his conviction, Ahmad al-Din was sent to the Texas Diagnostic and Classification Prison in Houston, where he began serving his life sentence without parole. Once a respected Army chaplain at Fort Bliss, Ahmad's fall from grace was a shock to the community. In prison, Ahmad struggled to adjust to his new reality. The once devout man was now isolated, spending most of his time alone in his cell. According to reports from prison officials, Ahmad avoided interactions with other inmates and rarely participated in group activities. His family, including his parents, cut off contact after the trial, further deepening his isolation. By the end of 2016, he had become a forgotten figure, with no visitors and little hope of appeal. Reverend George Kronstinger faced his own downfall after the trial. Once a respected figure at the fellowships of the Hunt Church, George's secrets were exposed during the investigation. His drug addiction and inappropriate advances toward Ariana had been revealed, tarnishing his reputation. Members of his congregation were outraged, and by mid-2018, attendance at the church had dropped significantly. Eventually, George was asked to step down as reverend. He checked into a rehabilitation center in Atlanta to address his addiction issues. Though he completed the program, he struggled to rebuild his life. By 2016, George had relocated to Florida, where he took a job at a small, struggling church. However, his past continued to follow him, and he never regained the influence he once had. As for Emmanuel Oliveros, his life took a different path after the trial. Cleared of any wrongdoing in Ariana's death, Emmanuel returned to his job as a mechanic at a local auto shop. However, the public's perception of him had changed. Many in El Paso viewed him with suspicion, given his infatuation with Ariana. He withdrew from his usual social circles, stopped volunteering at Ariana's former school, and was rarely seen at public events. In 2018, Emmanuel moved out of El Paso to a smaller town in Texas, seeking a fresh start. Though he remained haunted by the events surrounding Ariana's murder, he managed to rebuild his life, albeit quietly and away from the spotlight. For the community of El Paso, Texas, the murder of Ariana Hensley left a lasting scar, and the lives of those involved would never be the same. Ariana Hensley's tragic death reminds us of the dangers faced by those who live with secrets. Though justice was served, it came at an unbearable cost.